Ever feel that itch to know? Well, the real story.
Hmm.
Not just the surface stuff, but, the deeper currents. What's shaping our world, how we understand it.
Yeah, that's really what we try to do here, isn't it?
Exactly. We take fascinating source material that you've shared, and we dive deep, try to pull out the nuggets that really matter.
And today's dive, it's particularly interesting, I think. It's all sparked by this conversation around Terrence Howard's ideas,
Yeah.
often debated.
Oh, definitely.
We'll be looking at a transcript from the Julian Dory Daily YouTube channel. It features a discussion with someone they call a math physicist.
Okay, a math physicist.
Yeah.
Interesting. So our goal today, really, is to unpack the different viewpoints in that chat.
Right.
We want to get a better handle on why some people might feel, I don't know, uneasy or doubtful about mainstream science. And maybe unpack this whole concept of truth, which turns out to be surprisingly slippery.
Yeah, where do we even start?
Good question. Where do we start?
Well, the conversation in the transcript, it kind of kicks off with something I think many people can relate to, that basic human drive for meaning. It suggests that, feelings of disillusionment, maybe from college debt or dead-end jobs, lack of retirement prospects, stuff like that, it can really trigger these deeper questions.
Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Or is this it?
Exactly, that feeling of, is this all there is?
Yeah, that definitely resonates. Stepping back and wondering about the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, the discussion moves into this idea about public skepticism towards science
Mm-hmm.
and the perception that science is pushing something called physicalism.
Right. Physicalism. The transcript clarifies, the old term was materialism, but physicalism is maybe more accurate now. It includes physical laws, not just like stuff you can touch.
Matter and laws.
Yeah. But for a lot of people, the feeling is still there if it's all just matter and energy and laws. What about our inner consciousness or those, weird experiences?
Like meditation or psychedelics or things that just feel like something more.
Exactly. Something beyond the purely physical.
And that brings us to folks like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
The transcript mentions criticism that he can be a bit dismissive.
Yeah, that's the perception some people have. That he kind of scoffs at ideas outside strict physicalism.
Almost mocks them.
Maybe. The transcript hints that maybe his own philosophical grounding could be looked at, but also that kind of attitude, it can really alienate people who are genuinely asking big questions.
Yeah, push them away instead of engaging.
And you have to consider the broader context, too. Trust.
Trust in institutions, experts.
Yeah,
It feels like that's declined, hasn't it?
definitely. And things like the COVID-19 pandemic, arguably, really amplified that. The transcript touches on how maybe perceived missteps or feeling like certain questions were off limits then might have fueled a more general skepticism towards science now, even in totally different areas.
It's like if you feel shut down asking about one unconventional thing, you're maybe less likely to trust experts on other things too.
Could be.
That feeling of being told, ask anything, but then feeling silly asking about, say, UFOs or something,
Yeah.
that tension seems important.
It really is. And it's sort of in this climate that someone like Terrence Howard comes into the conversation.
Right.
He's presented as, creative guy, someone not afraid to challenge the standard ideas, rethink things from square one.
Uh-huh. The transcript calls his thinking like a decision tree.
Yeah, like a branching path. You ask one question, and it leads down these increasingly complex, sometimes really surprising routes.
Like pulling one thread unravels the whole thing, but then gets rewoven totally differently.
Kind of. And the transcript points out the reaction to him tends to be pretty polarized. Two main camps.
Okay, what are they?
Well, they're on one side, you've got the established institutions. They largely dismiss him, which ironically might just make those who like his ideas dig in their heels more.
Creates an us versus them thing.
Totally. And then on the other side, you have people who are open to alternatives, and they often embrace his stuff enthusiastically, almost because the mainstream rejects it.
Like, if they hate it that much, maybe there's something to it.
Exactly. And that polarization makes it really, really hard to have a productive conversation.
Okay, so we've got this search for meaning, maybe some mistrust of science tied to physicalism, and this split reaction to someone asking big, unconventional questions. Now, this is where it gets really deep, I think. The discussion brings up this idea. It's not just fear of the unknown. It's also maybe a fear of the known.
Explain that.
Like a fear that reality isn't hiding some grand illusion, a fear that maybe this is it, but also a kind of longing for there to be something more, some hidden layer.
Ah, Okay. That connects to something called the hermeneutics of suspicion.
Hermeneutics of suspicion. Sounds fancy.
It just means a way of interpreting things where you don't take them at face value. You look beneath the surface.
Like Freud looking for unconscious motives or Marx looking at power structures.
Exactly. Thinkers like Nietzsche, Freud, Marx, they encouraged looking for hidden stuff. Power, money, unconscious drives. The idea is what you see might be hiding a deeper, maybe less comfortable truth.
So this mindset kind of encourages the belief that there's hidden knowledge out there, that the real truth isn't what we're told, and we have to actively, uncover it.
Precisely. And this is where that image, that allegory of Plato's cave becomes so powerful.
Ah, the cave. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know the story, right? Prisoners chained up, facing a wall.
Seeing only shadows flicker by.
And believing those shadows are reality. Then one prisoner gets out.
Is blinded by the sun at first.
Right, but eventually sees the world as it truly is. But then when he goes back to tell the others...
They don't believe him. They think he's crazy.
They ridicule him, yeah. The transcript highlights how perfectly that story captures the feelings some people have about institutions, the academy, that they're either wrong or worse, deliberately hiding the true knowledge.
The whole disclosure idea.
Exactly. It breeds this inherent suspicion towards established information sources.
It's a potent metaphor, feeling like you see something others don't, or you're being kept in the dark. Which leads to the next question the transcript raises.
Yeah.
Even if there is hidden knowledge, or aliens are real, or whatever, then what?
Yeah, the then what question. It mentions Lou Elizondo's thought experiment. Like, okay, aliens are confirmed. How does that actually change your family dinner conversation tonight?
Good point. It shifts the focus from just knowing to the actual impact on our lives.
Right. And this is where the discussion broadens the idea of truth itself, moving beyond just propositional truth.
Propositional. You mean like statements that are just true or false? The sky is blue. True.
Yeah.
The sky is green. False.
Exactly that. The transcript brings in John Vervaeke's idea of 4 kinds of truth.
Okay, 4 kinds. What are they?
Well, besides propositional, there's participatory truth. That's the truth you know by doing. Like, you truly know how to ride a bike by riding it, not just reading about it.
Ah, okay. Experiential truth. Got it.
Then procedural truth. Knowing the right way to do something, like following steps correctly to use your phone or build IKEA furniture.
The how-to truth. Makes sense.
And finally, perspectival truth. This is about seeing the world from a specific viewpoint. It's tied to consciousness. My headache is a truth for me.
Your unique perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so participatory, procedural, perspectival, and propositional.
Right. And the transcript suggests maybe our view of truth is a bit impoverished because we focus so much on just the propositional, the true, false statement.
Like we've lost touch with these other ways we know and connect with reality.
Exactly. And then the conversation takes this really fascinating detour into mathematics, Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Okay, Gödel. Sounds heavy. Break it down for us.
I'll try. So basically, Gödel was looking at maths. People before him, like Hilbert, wanted to prove maths was totally complete and consistent. Like you could prove every true statement.
Okay. Makes sense you'd want that for math.
But Gödel proved you can't. In any sufficiently complex system of axioms, the basic rules of math, there will always be statements that are true, but you cannot prove them to be true using the system's own rules.
Wait, what? True things you can't prove.
Yep. And crucially, you can't prove them false either. They're called independent statements.
Wow. Okay. My brain hurts a little. The transcript uses the liar's paradox. This statement is false.
Yeah, as a kind of analogy for that self-reference problem, Gödel's actual version was more like, this statement is not provable. If it were provable, the system would be inconsistent. If it's not provable, then it's true, but unprovable within the system.
That is genuinely mind-bending. So even math, pure logic, has limits built in.
Seems so. Limits to what we can know with certainty from within the system. And building on that, the conversation gets into infinity. Cantor's work.
Right. Different sizes of infinity. That sounds impossible. Infinity is infinity, right?
Well, that's the intuitive thought. But Cantor found a way to compare them. He talked about countable infinity, like the natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on. You can count them, even if it takes forever.
Okay, yeah.
Countable. Then there's uncountable infinity. That's like the real numbers, all the numbers, including all the decimals, like pi, that go on forever.
So how do you show one is bigger?
He used this idea of one-to-one correspondence. Imagine trying to pair up every natural number with a real number, like making them hold hands. If you can pair them all up perfectly, with none left over on either side, the sets are the same size, even if infinite.
Okay.
Cantor's diagonal argument, it's a clever proof, basically shows you cannot make that perfect pairing between natural numbers and real numbers. There will always be real numbers left over.
So there are fundamentally more real numbers than natural numbers,
Yeah.
even though both are infinite.
Exactly. One infinity is genuinely larger than the other.
That really does mess with your intuition.
Wow.
The transcript mentions a hierarchy. Infinity 0, infinity 1.
Yeah, Cantor showed there's a whole ladder of infinities, and then it touches on things like the continuum hypothesis. Is there an infinity between the size of the natural numbers and the real numbers? Turns out that's another one of those independent questions, like Gödel's stuff. You can't prove it true or false from the standard axioms.
And the Paris-Harrington theorem, another unprovable thing.
Another example, yeah. A true statement about graph theory, apparently, that you can't prove using standard arithmetic.
Okay, so what's the takeaway from all this math stuff?
Well, it underscores a really key distinction. Proving something mathematically within a system of rules is different from proving something physically through observation and experiment.
The map isn't the territory.
Precisely. Math is an amazing map for describing physics, but it's not the physical world itself. And the map itself has these inherent blank spots or limits.
It definitely brings you back to that sense of, wow, there's so much we don't know, or maybe can't know. The vastness.
It does. And this is where the conversation loops back to philosophy, but with a much darker twist. It introduces H.P. Lovecraft.
Lovecraft, the horror writer.
That's the one. He's presented as offering a kind of dark upgrade to Plato's cave.
Okay, how so?
The transcript quotes him saying something like, "The most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents."
Meaning, ignorance is bliss.
Kind of. Lovecraft's idea was that our limited understanding might actually be a shield, protecting us. He suggested that if we really did grasp the true nature of the universe through science or whatever, the knowledge might be so alien, so terrifying, that it would drive us mad or make us want to retreat back into comforting ignorance.
So unlike Plato, where escaping the cave leads to enlightenment.
Right. Plato's escapee finds this beautiful, ordered reality outside. Lovecraft suggests it's maybe more likely you escape the cave and find yourself in, like, the Amazon rainforest at night, or the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Something vast, dangerous, maybe totally incomprehensible.
That definitely challenges the rosy view of just seeking truth and expecting it to be, nice.
It's a much more sobering idea about what knowledge might actually entail.
And the conversation then connects us back to how we use the word truth today, especially now, with trust being so low.
Yeah, the transcript points out how truth itself has become such a loaded term. Think about truth social, for example. It's almost weaponized in polarized debates.
And the erosion of trust may be worse after the pandemic.
Yeah.
It leads some people to just assume institutions are lying, actively concealing the truth.
Right. That paraphrased Dana White quote about never trusting doctors again. It's a pretty stark example of that really broad brush distrust.
And when you're that suspicious, it's easy to think your view is the absolute truth, and anyone who disagrees is just wrong, or maybe even has bad intentions.
Which makes dialogue impossible. And this is where the idea of trust itself comes back in. The transcript mentions a German study.
Oh yeah, what did it find?
It linked how honest people are with how much they trust others, suggesting that maybe constant suspicion says something about our own internal state, not just the world.
Interesting. So mistrust might correlate with less honesty.
Potentially. And this leads to maybe a counter idea? The primacy of beauty. Or maybe to hermeneutics of beauty instead of just suspicion.
Okay, beauty as primary. What does that mean here?
It draws on Plato again. His idea that beauty with a capital B is something fundamental, real, maybe even more real than the imperfect physical things we see. You gave that lovely example.
About my wife, seeing her essential self despite changes.
Exactly. Like we recognize the core cupness of a cup from any angle. Beauty lets us see an underlying reality, a through line, that stays consistent even when surfaces change.
The idea being, you can't love what's not beautiful. That beauty allows for trust, for connection to something real.
That's the concept, recognizing something real beyond just the appearance.
And this also connects back to the science mistrust thing. Maybe it's not the method people distrust, but the messengers, the institutions, especially if money seems involved.
That's part of it. Neil deGrasse Tyson comes up again. And the idea that science sometimes explains the world using things we can't see, atoms, quantum fields, that can feel disconnecting from our lived experience.
Right. It asks us to trust in things unseen, described by experts.
Exactly. So this primacy of beauty idea, it doesn't mean ditching critical thinking, not at all. But it suggests that when we call something an illusion, we're kind of taking a stand on what we think is real.
And we need to be just as critical about that stance, about our own assumptions.
Absolutely. Turning that suspicious eye inward. Questioning our own motives. Why do we believe what we believe? The transcript mentions these underlying drivers.
Like fear, greed, insecurity,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Things that might subconsciously push our search for truth in a certain direction.
Exactly. And it suggests maybe a genuine pursuit of truth involves working on those parts of ourselves too. Because truth really should be about integration, bringing things together, not just creating more division or doubt.
Yeah, that really hits home. How you can state a technically true fact, but do it in a way that's just harmful, divisive.
Right. The example about commenting on someone's weight, the information might be accurate, but the way it's delivered, the intent, that changes everything.
So truth-seeking isn't just blurting things out.
No, it's described as maybe this slow, sometimes uncomfortable process, like therapy almost, where you're carefully, honestly dredging up deeper understanding.
Contrasting just being authentic, saying whatever pops into your head, versus actually speaking truth, which needs thought, care, maybe even reluctance.
Yes. And the transcript warns against using truth as a weapon, you know? Ah, I'm just being blunt. You can't handle my truth. That kind of thing.
Right, using it as an excuse for being unkind or thoughtless. So, bringing it all back around to Terrence Howard.
Mm.
The conversation ends with some empathy for him, and maybe a critique of how quickly the Academy dismisses him.
Yeah, there's a sense of that, suggesting that, look, even if his ideas are way out there, maybe he's accidentally getting people interested in science, in the periodic table, in number systems, people who might not have been otherwise.
Sparking curiosity, even unconventionally.
Right. It even mentions the idea of, like, what if we did define a system where 1 × 1 = 2? Just exploring alternatives to shake things up.
Okay, so as we wrap up this pretty intense deep dive, it feels like we've journeyed through a lot. The human need for meaning, the tricky nature of truth, the limits of what we know, trust, suspicion, beauty.
Wow. It's a lot. But I think a key takeaway, maybe, is just recognizing truth isn't simple. It's not one thing.
Right, those 4 kinds of truth.
Yeah. Facts, experiences, procedures, perspectives, they all play a part. And critical thinking is vital, obviously. But maybe it needs to be turned inward just as much as outward, examining our own biases, our own motivations.
And maybe being open to different perspectives, even the really strange ones. Not necessarily to accept them wholesale, but because they might just spark a new question we hadn't considered.
Exactly. They can open up new lines of inquiry.
So a final thought then, for you listening.
Mm.
Thinking about those 4 truths, propositional, procedural, participatory, perspectival, which one or which combination feels most central to how you make sense of the world? And maybe, how might being more aware of your own motivations, those deeper drivers, shape your own search for knowledge and understanding?
Yeah, something to mull over.
Definitely. Keep exploring, keep diving deep, and feel free to share what you uncover.